Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's keynote for the first ever Colorado Sunfest. I'm Tyler Smith, Xcel Energy's Director of Regional Government Affairs. I'm so happy to be here today, and it's exciting to see so many different voices, interests, perspectives, and expertise from across the state of Colorado come together in this one place. Our Xcel Energy team has been looking forward to this event and the opportunity it offers to strengthen partnerships, cultivate new ones, and recognize the importance of cooperation. It's an honor for us to sponsor Sunfest, and it's amazing to see the impact and intersection of policy, politics, climate, and the outdoors. These are all the things that make Colorado such a special place. At Xcel Energy, we recognize that we have a responsibility to keep Colorado beautiful, help the state meet their environmental goals, and operate in a way that preserves our natural resources. Addressing the risks from climate change is one of our highest priorities at Xcel. We've led a clean energy transition for nearly 2 decades, moving forward at a pace and scale that allows us to reach net zero carbon emissions responsibly. We were the first U.S. energy provider to set aggressive carbon reduction goals for all the ways our customers use energy. That's including electricity, heating, and transportation. And we're leading the way towards that cleaner energy future with our customers, communities, and many other partners, many of them in this room today. Sustainability isn't just about the environment, though. We aim to deliver exceptional service and partnership to help our communities thrive. It's why we bring energy and education resources directly to the people who use them. If you haven't already, I would encourage you to stop by just outside in the Tivoli Center today and talk to the folks at our red truck. And the red part of that red truck stands for Resources, Education, Delivered. We've been bringing that red truck and our energy experts to Colorado communities and events to help answer questions, share information, and get customers connected to assistance and programs designed to fit their needs. If you're interested in having the red truck visit your city or community, let us know. It's another way we can partner with our city leaders to create strong, vibrant communities and work together to use energy wisely so that we can reduce our collective carbon footprint and protect natural resources in the process. So, because of all of those reasons is why I'm especially excited for the topic of today's keynote. Today's keynote will be moderated by award-winning writer Jason Blevins. Jason covers the outdoor industry from the inside out and focuses on topics honing in on public lands, the ski industry, mountain business and housing, and Western Slope perspectives. He produces The Outsider, which is a weekly newsletter for The Sun, with thorough coverage of outdoor issues in the environment and includes insights on Colorado's $62 billion outdoor recreation industry. By being here today, you'll get to listen in on a deep dive conversation about the outdoor recreation industry, which is not only a key pillar to Colorado's economy, but also a major contributor to our quality of life. We'll hear about unique approaches to balancing outdoor recreation while protecting communities and natural resources. And we'll get an inside track on the political, economic, and cultural progress being shaped by the outdoor recreation industry. So please help me welcome Jason Blevins to the stage.
Hey, everybody. Everybody's eating their sandwiches. Really stoked to have this conversation with Conor Hall, our outdoor recreation boss in Colorado.
I prefer czar.
Czar, you like that? Bike czar. Everybody wants czar. There you go. I will lean into the mic, of course. Thanks, everybody. What a cool things that Conor's been in the office. Let's go through Conor's quick bio. One thing that I find most interesting about Conor is that he grew up in Crestone. You guys been in Crestone? I've met people who've grown up in Crestone.
The weirdest mountain town out there.
Yeah, they don't look like Conor. They wear robes and call themselves the Wizard and stuff.
I had a phase. Okay.
You worked with Hick. You worked with Bloomberg when he ran for president. You worked at the Trust for Public Lands, and you took over the OREC office in March 22. And you hit the road. That's one of the most interesting things. One of the coolest aspects of my job is that I get to go to all the Western Slope communities, kind of spend a lot of time and develop relationships in all these small towns. And that's something you've been able to do in the past, year and a half. Really, just sort of. I think you went just about everywhere. But talk a little bit about what you learned on that trip, how it's kind of informed, your next steps in this office, and I'm particularly interested in what you found in terms of commonalities of Colorado people. Like we like to divide each other into camps in this country. And the more you travel the Western Slope, the more, for me at least, I realized how similar we all are and how we all have really shared values. Even if there's a capital R, capital D by your name, there's something unique about the appreciation for what we have in Colorado that sort of brings us all together. But want to hear, about your travels and, some of the places you went and kind of what you learned and how that might be informing your movements in the office.
Yeah. Well, first of all, great to be here with all of you, and great to be up here with Jason. Last time we did this was in Salida on that tour, and after a couple beers, I think, and it's great that they let us do it again. So, yeah, this was right after I took over this office about a year and a half ago. One of the first things that I did was just this big listening tour of the state. And so probably put about 12,000 miles on the car, made it to most counties in the state, met with thousands and thousands of people. And, really the goal was to just hear what was going on, to connect, to be out there, especially coming out of the pandemic. And to talk about some of the programs that we had that could help, especially rural outdoor recreation economies, and create jobs, retain jobs, et cetera. And, couple key things that were readily apparent. One was the biggest issue everywhere was affordable housing. That should come as no surprise. But what was a little bit surprising was even in those communities that you maybe wouldn't think it was as acute of a problem, like Trinidad or Natarita or Sterling, they also were having challenges with affordable housing. I mean, it was, maybe a little less intense than, Telluride or Vail, but there were still real issues there. And so, one thing that we, after that listening tour came away with was we need to lean in to this discussion. This industry has to lean in, has to be a part of this discussion, helping solve this problem. Some of the commonalities, there were a lot, but some of the ones that really stand out were, just people's deep love and passion for the outdoors, in every corner of the state. 92% of Coloradans partake in some form or fashion of outdoor recreation or enjoying nature. And in my humble opinion, that's one of the last great unifiers that we have in the public arena. That transcends rural and urban and red and independent and blue. It's one of the few things that we all do. And
Sure.
It's really one of the reasons that we're all here in this great state. And we're so lucky to have so much, beautiful nature. Not
Sure.
that everyone has fair access to that. That's a whole different thing. But that was one of the other takeaways, that there's a lot of power really in this unifying thing that we all share. And that gives me hope that we can solve some of these tough problems that we face as an industry.
And I see recreation really weaving through some of these complex issues, like connecting recreation with housing.
Yeah.
Used to be peripheral. Now it's like it's integral. And public lands management and small town government control. All these things that are seemingly disparate, and they've always been in silos. We kind of like, that's the Forest Service. They do what they do, and recreation does what it does. Skiing does what it does. And really, recreation in itself has been very siloed over the past 20 years. And it's only recently, as we get these big BEA numbers and starting to see you can move the needle on not just economic growth but political growth, movements and cultural change, social change, really start to make some pretty sweeping changes together. So it's interesting to see how recreation can sort of weave together all these feeling like they're disparate interests, maybe using what they've learned and we've learned in the past, 5-10 years of realizing that, hey, skiers and snowboarders, we get together, we're gonna, be a lot more powerful than fighting each other, or motorized versus non-motorized. I mean, those things still exist, but I feel like more than ever before in the history of this industry, those walls are being torn down and people are reaching across. And it's partly because you could be a hunter who rides a motorcycle who loves to go hike in the wilderness and backcountry ski. Yep. It's like we're not in these small little worlds anymore. We're sort of venturing across all these things. And that's what you see in these small towns, these people that do it all and recreate in every way, and they're so passionate about their place. Was wanting you to, riff on that.
We'll build on that great riff.
Exactly.
The reality is that there's been a movement over the past 15, maybe 20 years to come together and to give and really empower this industry with real voice and influence. So in terms of value added to the U.S. economy, conservatively, the outdoor economy is about $862 billion in value added every year. In Colorado, as mentioned earlier, it's a $62 billion economy, over 500,000 jobs, so a little over 18% of the workforce. This is a major, major economic driver. In Colorado, it's arguably the largest. And so it's bigger on a national level than oil and gas and mining combined. It's bigger than the pharmaceutical industry. It's bigger than the agricultural industry, bigger than the automotive industry. All of these major industries that have had a huge impact on our everyday life, have had a huge impact on the policies that are passed, for better or for worse. But we have not been at that decision-making table. We have not. It's also a wildly disparate industry, and with a whole lot of small to medium players. There aren't a ton of big, players. Even VF Corp, headquartered here in Denver, REI and Patagonia combined only account for about 2.7, 2.8 of the overall industry. So that's tiny, and those are really our biggest players. And so there's been this movement to, and Colorado's been leading this, to organize and to give real voice and to play in politics. I mean, we as an industry and people who love the outdoors face some really serious issues. Top of mind, climate change, protecting our public land and public water, and trying to create more equitable access. I see Jackie Miller from GoCo out there leading that charge. And to do that, you need to be at those tables. You need to be, throwing around your political weight. And so part of that movement was the creation of these state outdoor recreation offices. Colorado was the second state after Utah under then Governor John Hickenlooper. It's one of the first things I worked on for him. And another part of that is the creation of a federal outdoor recreation office. The federal government is such a vast, sweeping bureaucracy, and we don't have a point person there communicating with states on everything outdoor recreation. We have a whole bunch of different agencies that touch outdoor recreation and influence, and probably 6 or 7 agencies that play a fairly big role in this: Interior, Commerce, USDA. But we don't have that point person, and so I've been working with Luis Benitez, who was our first director of this office, Senator Hickenlooper, and some other champions on the Hill and Governor Polis has been a great champion of this too, to create that federal office, which would go a long way in just streamlining a lot of the communication and the coordination of this growing movement.
And where do you guys see that? I was intrigued to see that you guys Department of Commerce is raising to the top for that office, which I thought is interesting. I would have thought Interior or USDA Forest Service or something.
Yeah, it's a good question. We've been back and forth on this, but
Sure.
Commerce, really the idea is, again, this is such a major economic driver. It's the source of nearly 5 million American jobs. And we have I think the secretary there, Gina Raimundo, really understands that. And so we saw an opening, and that's everything in politics. When you see that Overton window. And so, and Senator Hickenlooper has a great relationship with her. And as a secretary, you can unilaterally create a role or a position. And so that seems to be the kind of quickest way to at least, get something rolling. The hope would be that we were able to prove the value of, having that person in Commerce, and then Interior, USDA, hopefully follow suit down the road.
And so they would have their own point
Yeah.
person, so there would be this office with a recreation
Exactly.
from DOI.
And then all of those would coordinate very, very closely together from their respective. Interior's a little more focused on kind of that conservation stewardship angle. Commerce obviously focused on the economic angle. USDA, a little more conservation and stewardship as well. So each has an important role to play, but that's kind of the hope. Seed it there and see where it goes.
It's interesting. I think that effort might be amplified if you guys have that big, clean $1 trillion number that's going to come out in a couple months.
Yeah, that is what we're expecting, to hit that $1 trillion mark, and that will be helpful.
Yeah, that will be helpful. Speaking of that money, so what'd you have? 9.7 from the EDA that you split with CTO. Mm-hmm. So we got all this money coming out of the pandemic, right? Yep. U.S. federal government flooded states with all this cash, and a lot of it's going to, you were in charge. As soon as you took the office, you're like, wow, I am in the grant distribution. Yeah, I know. It's an incredible position, something that the office has never, obviously not been, doling out money. So pretty sizable amounts of money that have flowed through recreation to nonprofits, to governments, to, land conservation work, to workforce development things. Talk a little bit about how that's gone, and we're starting to see some of that money land. Have you seen, do we have any early reports on how this stuff is kind of shaking things up out in the, rural compound, rural and urban recreational worlds?
Yeah, great question. It turns out creating federal grant programs from scratch is not that easy. But we were really, thankful to have that funding from the American Rescue Plan Act to be able to distribute out across the state. And really the main focus was, again, job creation, job retention, trying to fortify those outdoor recreation economies, especially those that maybe hadn't come back or bounced back from the pandemic. And so we had two different programs. One was the Colorado State Outdoor Recreation Grant, or COSORG, because we need an abbreviation for everything in government. The other one was the Outdoor Recreation Industry Impact Fund. And so,
Quaff?
Yeah,
Coif?
they said I couldn't say that.
Okay.
It's too close to other things. All right. So basically, we funded through the Outdoor Recreation Industry Impact Fund, funded businesses and nonprofits that could show a demonstrable loss in revenue or increase in costs, or both. In many cases, it was both. And so those were mostly payroll expenses. For the other grant program, we were supporting workforce development, infrastructure updates and improvements, so a little bit of marketing and promotion, and then planning and technical assistance. And I'll give you two examples of some of the projects that we funded. One, and we're still getting the funding out the door. These infrastructure projects take quite a bit longer when it's federal money. You have to go through a bunch of different hoops, turns out. But we're giving a big grant, $250,000 grant, to the Kuchara ski hill. And so this was, has anyone here ever been to Kuchara in Huerfano County? Okay, there's a couple. So tiny community, beautiful community in Huerfano County, one of the poorest counties in the state. And they had this ski hill forever. That was kind of the heart and soul of that community, and the biggest economic driver, biggest source of jobs. And back in 2000, maybe 2000, 2001, it went away. It had a series of bad Texas owners who didn't know how to run a ski hill. and it ceased to exist. And ever since then, the community has been trying to bring that back. And so they've raised about $150,000 to do that, which is remarkable, given the income level of that community. And but they were still about $250,000 short of bringing this one lift back.
Just one, yeah.
Yeah.
The one lift that's on private land.
Exactly. And so they came to us, and with this vision, and we were able to give them this grant. And what I love about this grant is that it kind of gets them over the hump, and it's going to be a real source of economic impact for this community, of jobs for this community, a source for people from all over that area to come ski. Otherwise, people are driving up to hours and hours and hours up to Breckenridge or Monarch to ski, and it wasn't affordable, it wasn't accessible. And so it's run by a nonprofit too. And all the community's volunteering, and they're gonna let kids learn to ski for free. Lift tickets are gonna be like $20. I mean, it's a whole different type of experience. And no, it's not gonna be this massive. It's not gonna be Vail, but they're 7 or 8 runs, and it's gonna be again that beating soul, heart and soul of the community, and a real economic driver.
And the hope is down there. I've written a couple stories about the Kuchara revival, and I was
You're probably a local expert.
went and skied down there back in the day when that place was open. There's big southern face exposure. That high stuff is like a good windstorm in the San Luis Valley catches all of it, and it will strip all the snow off that peak. But they're hoping, Forest Service pulled that permit and was like, we are not going to have this roller coaster open closed business on federal land like that. Pull your lifts out, get out of here. And they didn't even pull the lifts out. They got those old chairs still dangling around up there. It's really pretty wild. But the idea is if they can fire that up with that money, get that chairlift going, show some numbers, show some growth. Next thing you know, Forest Service might be willing to go back and revisit, like some stuff. And that would be game changer for that valley. Truly change everything down there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And one other example that I love, we gave a grant to Colorado Outward Bound, great organization. Probably a lot of folks in this room have done Outward Bound, hopefully. We gave them a $100,000 grant to keep running a program that was at risk of closing down that really works with, targets historically marginalized populations in their staff and leadership training. And so working with those populations to develop the next round of instructors, of trip leaders, of folks who are going to go on to be really key pillars of our industry. So just there's some great examples like that. It has been a tremendous amount of work, way more than probably any of us thought going into it, but it's well worth it when we see those types of results.
And one of the pillars of your office is workforce development, and you're starting to see that. One of the cool things, written a couple stories about Chuck's, Right Challenge, Right Collegiate Challenge.
I think he's here somewhere.
Yeah, and that,
Chuck Sullivan.
The way these universities are stepping up, it was Western with the MBA program, and now it's at Mesa, and there's
DU just
DU, and there's this growing, push to professionalize and really, develop the next generation of outdoor recreation. And that's another thing about just reflective of the maturation of this industry, whereas outdoor recreation was what you did after work, or on weekends. And now it is a career, and it is a vibrant career that can pay well, and you can raise a family and all that stuff. It's really interesting. I think that's one of the cooler, as you watch this industry kind of grow up, creating this next generation of innovative young thinkers that are keen on it and fired up. And
totally. Well, and I'll say this too. I couldn't agree more. And we gave a big grant to Chuck Sullivan and the Right to do kind of this workforce development work as well with the Collegiate Challenge. And if you haven't heard about it, worth checking out. But Colorado's probably the leader, anywhere on kind of that workforce talent pipeline piece. Every Colorado State institution of higher education now has a degree program or a certificate program in outdoor recreation in some form or fashion. And no other state can say that or even come all that close. And so, we're producing a tremendous amount of talent in this space. And, where the talent exists, either where you attract the talent or create the talent, that's where industry thrives. And not just when I say industry, I mean the for-profit, but also the nonprofit, local governments that do this work, tribes, et cetera. I mean, the whole ecosystem really, really thrives when we do that well.
And in many ways, you're giving kids in some of these towns that, you see it in mountain towns a lot, kids that grow up and they are really good skiers, paddlers, bike riders, and everything, but they have to leave.
Yeah.
They don't have.
Yeah, I didn't stay in Crestone.
And in many ways, like a career in outdoor recreation gives them options and, opportunities that maybe weren't there, to stay in the community, which is, I don't know, like I think back when VF pulled out a Steamboat and, they're like, we're moving everybody in this, from Smartwool to Denver. And a lot of those people are like, pry me out of this town.
Yeah.
And they put their heads down and they thought, what can I do? Where is there opportunity? What can I do? And you see now all these really cool outdoor recreation type ideas and companies and businesses and all these things, that sprouted from those folks who were in an outdoor recreation company. Arguably one of the most interesting things that's happened to the steamboat economy was when Smartwool pulled out and forced those, hundreds of people to be like, what can I do to stay in this town? And that's, those are opportunities that, young, smart, vibrant, college-educated kids are coming up with. And I think that's, another example of something going well in this industry. So you were just up at the tourism meeting up there in Fort Collins, and another pillar in your outdoor recreation world is conservation and stewardship and protection. And that's something that I know Tim over in the tourism office is dealing with, and it's something that I'm sure you got an earful of when you travel around these towns. A lot of these towns, especially coming out of the pandemic, I was just talking to Bill Rock up in about community impacts of some of this increased traffic, coupled with the incredible spike in real estate, coupled with the new residents who are coming in with a lot of money and things like this. And I wrote a story out of Headwaters Economics, study that kind of looked at these amenity-rich communities that are really struggling to find ways to protect, the most important thing in their world. And it's really deep-seated, it's passionate, it fuels all kinds of council fights and discussions and, passions, and, people feel like they're being run out of town, people are leaving town, cashing out, they're weary of long lines at their businesses, and they're weary of tourists, and that's one of the most time-worn narratives in a ski town ever. But now it's not just ski towns, you're like, everybody's feeling this increased appreciation for the outdoors in numbers and traffic and housing and all these different impacts. How do you talk when you were at those meetings and you heard people talking about that and they were like, don't be bringing tourists to our town, don't be starting new programs in our town, we want this town to stay like it is, and it's a hard thing to do, to stand still in this shifting world, especially coming out of that pandemic. But like, how would you talk to some of those folks when you heard those? And they were passionate. They still are. This is
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. We're always, this is always going to be a discussion, I think, in Colorado.
Always.
Because again, we're, Colorado. So many people come here to enjoy the outdoors, and it's a major economic driver. Tourism contributes something like $25 billion to our economy, hundreds of thousands of jobs as well, and to kind of address that. Well, actually, one other big variable here is the huge increase in people going outside, through the pandemic. And so, there's a UPenn study that was released about a year ago that showed about 20% increase in usage of the outdoors. There was an Outdoor Industry Association study that marked that we had about 7 million new users, people who had not been really in the outdoors before.
I mean, it's
huge
happening.
Numbers, yeah, huge numbers.
Like what the industry has always wanted.
Yeah,
it's
and we're at the tip of that
Yeah,
spear. I mean, a lot of those people are coming to Colorado to do that. And so one thing that we did, well, actually, I'll give you a couple things that we did to help kind of address that. We partnered with the tourism office to shift, a big chunk of their destination marketing, trying to get people here, dollars to destination management and stewardship. Those running targeted leave no trace campaigns to tourists who are coming in, helping support communities in their stewardship planning. Because one thing that we do know is that we can't sit here in Denver and decree, this is how stewardship has to be in every community across the state. We can give ideas, we can give tools, but each plan is going to look a little bit different. And I'll give you an example. Crested Butte and Aspen, both huge, tourism draws, obviously get huge crowds year-round. And so, we're supporting them in their stewardship planning, and especially as it pertained to trails. And so Aspen's plan that they came up with was, we're going to drive all the tourists to, 4 or 5 different trails that have the hardened infrastructure to deal with big crowds. And then, locals use a lot of the other trails. Crested Butte had an opposite strategy. They were like, we're going to try to disperse all these tourists across all of our trails so that, there's not 4 or 5 trails that are completely overrun. So, trying to ultimately accomplishing the same thing,
like
but
cool
2 different
map,
strategies.
like Crested Butte has the map
Exactly,
for your phone that you could go access all their trails.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
Really neat.
So, and that's just to say it's got to come from the community. But we have to be, from the state level, we have to then be ready to support, to do what we can do to help with that implementation of that. And then, one other pretty cool thing that's happening at the state level is, we're partnered with GOCO and CPW around this regional partnership initiative. And this is, it's a grant program, and we fund for capacity and planning and technical assistance for different regions, communities, to bring outdoor recreation interests together with conservation interests, together with, if agriculture is a big thing, there are agriculture, land managers, all those kind of key players that too often, if we're being honest, have gotten at odds with each other around development.
And then they stop at the boundary of their county lines.
Yeah.
Like, well, that's not my problem
which,
anymore.
that's not how,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we've now got 15 different regional partnerships around the state. We're still a couple gaps. We'd like to see a few more on the Eastern Plains, for example, but pretty good coverage across the state. And, with this funding, they have a dedicated person who can actually do this coalition building, because that's what this is. This is intense and not easy coalition building. And bring these interests together to plan and see what the vision is for that region from a conservation and outdoor recreation standpoint especially. And so ultimately all of that will then filter up into a statewide conservation, outdoor recreation, and climate resiliency plan we're calling the Colorado Outdoor Strategy. GOCO is generously funding this work. And no other state has tried that before. In my mind, this is similar in ambition and potential impact to the Colorado Water Plan that we did about 10 years ago. So huge, big, complex, not easy planning process. It's a pain. But what we could create here is a real roadmap for how these things work together, how we can develop recreation in a sustainable way that, while we're still protecting key land, key, habitat corridors, all those different things, water resources, and because that's really what we need. This is, a complex issue with a lot of different inputs, and, it's timely. We've got to really make some progress on some of these things, and so I think this plan is going to go a long way in helping us address some of these issues.
Yeah, the regional approach where you're actually getting that local input, and this isn't the state saying, build houses now, which didn't go over well.
I can't comment on that. I think my boss may be in the back of the room.
But the idea of actually getting all these different voices involved and crossing borders, which is huge.
That's the only way it works. It's again gotta the communities have to have buy-in, have to have input, and then at the state level, we can shape, what are the common themes, what are the common challenges, and that's really our role from the state.
Switch gears real quick. You were 2 weeks in the office when the Outdoor Retailer pulled out of Denver, and that was like the big
I knew this
trophy
one was coming.
that made us all cool. And I'm like, what the hell did you say to Emerald Exposition? They were like, oh no, Connor's here. Let's go back to Salt Lake.
We better go.
Yeah. No. But when that happened, you said this is an opportunity.
Yeah.
And with the shifting stuff that's been going on with trade shows and the way that trade show was going, I was a veteran of that trade show, been going to SIA since it was in Vegas, and many shows in Salt Lake with Outdoor Retailer, and what it had become was a lot different than what it was. And it's safe to say that there's major changes underway, and I'm still of the opinion that thing's going to die in Salt Lake. I'll say that, but you don't have to. But so in many ways, it's good that you didn't have it on your, have it turned to sand in your hands. So, but you've come up with something. You just said, hey, this is an opportunity. You spent a couple years now, or a year now, working with some different interests for this outside festival. You had said something along the lines of South by Southwest, kind of getting it all together, getting consumer facing, not just business stuff, not just stodgy old buying and selling, which wasn't even going on. It's not just businesses talking to businesses, the same people over and over. Maybe expand that, kind of show the new face of outdoors. Bring some fun into it with some music and films and stuff. But where are we at on the outside festival?
Yeah. So this has been a really fun thing to work on. Basically, I think it was 2 weeks that I was into the job, and I got a call from Richard Scharf at Visit Denver, and they were Emerald Expositions, who owns the show, was supposed to give us at least a 10-day warning before they publicly announced what they were doing. And Richard is like, it's 7:30 in the morning on a Wednesday, and I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, yeah, Emerald's about to announce they're pulling out in 10 minutes. Yeah. And
the next call was
I'm
Jason
not going to spend
Blevins.
I'm not going to spend too long. They weren't great partners. They, quite frankly, could care less about the industry. They're a trade show company that owns 140 other trade shows owned by a private equity group. And that's their focus, making money. It's not about the health of the outdoor industry. And so even before they, made that decision, I had gone around talking with different leaders in the industry, and trying to discern what do we need as an industry. And one of the things that I kept hearing was we need that gathering place. We need that place to connect and come together and try to solve some of these issues that affect all of us in this industry. And so we were going to build this thing regardless of whether OR stayed or left. If they stayed, we were just going to have to do it with Emerald.
Right.
And so I really meant that, what I said publicly when they made their decision to go back to Utah, even with the 25 largest brands boycotting, and they still are, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to start from scratch and build something with partners from the industry that is, by the industry, for the industry, to meet a need to connect as an industry. And so, what we said was, kind of a South by Southwest concept for this industry, a real platform for thought leadership to bring together the best minds across this space. And not just a B2B trade show. There'll be a component of that. The Big Gear Show and E-Revolution are pieces of what we're creating. But we wanted it to be, to engage the public in a different way. One thing about Outdoor Retailer and I worked with Hickenlooper to bring them to Denver back in 16 and 17. Yeah.
Big deal.
It was huge. And it was a good investment. I mean, it brought a great ROI for the state while it was here. But the pandemic changed. The business model's pretty antiquated. And the pandemic changed it. If you survived the pandemic as an outdoor business, they canceled 2 shows. So you had to figure out how to do business without those shows. So you're totally right. Business was not being written at those shows. No. People were just coming to connect. Yeah. But they were paying, the brands were, not thrilled because they were paying huge amounts to do that. And so, we want to reimagine that. We want to lower that bar of entry for the brands, not paying, $250,000 for a booth. And then we want to engage the public in a different way. And so, because that was the thing, that's what I was saying before about OR. We were giving them some taxpayer dollars to be here and good ROI for those dollars, but the public wasn't, as a, Coloradan, you couldn't get in there.
I used to hate writing stories about it. Like I'd go back to the business section.
I hated that.
And be like, here's a story that no one could go to.
Yeah.
With photos that no one could go see. I'm like,
and the reality is this. I mean, again, we're all, I think, aware, and we've talked about some of the issues that we face as an industry that we need to solve. We need to get beyond just those insular conversations with,
ourselves.
Yeah, with ourselves, bunch of guys and white guys and fleeces. And if we want to really affect change, it's got to go beyond that. So we've partnered with Outside Media, the biggest media conglomerate in the space, headquartered in Boulder, to do that. They had a similar vision to what we had, so we married these two things together. And they reach 80 million eyeballs a month, unique eyeballs. So that's that megaphone where we can, move beyond just those insular industry conversations. And ultimately, we want this, we want to have 50,000 people coming to this thing. We're going to start with 10,000, but
and it's a start next summer.
Yeah, so we're going to soft launch. I can't publicly say the dates yet. We're very close to confirming them, but early summer, 2024, a 3-day festival in Denver. And a lot of it is, again, going to be free and open to the public. And we're going to proactively try to bring in those populations, and especially kids that have been historically marginalized or who don't have quick, easy, safe access to the outdoors. So in Denver, you probably know there's the inverted L, that outdoor access is not great. And so instead of just saying, hey, you're welcome to come to this, we want to be a lot more proactive, and we want to do marketing there. We obviously give free access to all those folks, but also like run free shuttles for kids and their families to come down and jump on a rock wall for the first time, or ride a bike, or sit in a kayak, whatever it is. I mean, that first rung on the ladder of outdoor experience, so that they feel a little safer and welcomed into that space, or to hear from someone like the all black team that climbed Everest.
Phil Henderson.
Phil. So that they can see themselves in the outdoors, because it's not enough just to say, sure, everyone's welcome. And we really have to be proactive to work against centuries of exclusion.
Sure, and still provide that platform for outdoor industry folks to get together and share their sustainability, their climate, their DEI, all the different programs, and not just to themselves but to the public. So that every visitor gets to kind of see that.
And what better place to do it than Colorado? I mean, really. And and I'll just quickly say this too. Colorado. I mean, we are so lucky to have the natural resources we have. Obviously, we're so lucky to have the infrastructure we have around that. But it's also worth pointing out, we have amazing leaders in this space, and that's not true in every state. Governor Polis, Senator Hickenlooper, Senator Bennett, huge, really some of the best champions on any level for the outdoor industry, for conservation. And we've had a long kind of history on both sides, Republican and Democrat, of leaders that really understand the importance of this, and are willing to do things like create GOCO back in '92. I mean, that is truly the gold standard for conservation, funding.
Just sort of wrap it up. We'll go to public questions here. But about a year ago, we're riding a chairlift in Silverton, and I got a really good glimpse of sort of your source of passion and appreciation for the outdoors. We were at this group sort of party. They'd taken over Silverton Mountain, which just sold, by the way. Check it out, coloradosun.com.
Nice plug. That was seamless.
Yeah, there you go. It was called First Descents, and Conor had participated with this group as a kid, and everything that I've heard from you since then has been filtered through that conversation we had on that chairlift. It was one of the most, I think I was crying when we got off that thing.
Yeah, me too.
Tell us a little bit about your connection with that group and how that kind of sparked your this lifelong passion for the outdoors.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That was a great, really, really great conversation. So for anyone who doesn't know, First Ascent is a nonprofit that is founded and headquartered here in Colorado, but works all around the country. And they seek to heal young cancer survivors, young adult cancer survivors, and MS survivors through adventure, basically, rock climbing, kayaking, and surfing. And so part of my personal story, back when I was 21, I was diagnosed with cancer. Big tumors all through my chest, between my heart and my lungs.
You're a college kid.
Yeah, college. I was a sophomore in college. It was the last day of my sophomore year. And I was convinced I was going to die. I didn't say that publicly. I told everyone it would be fine, but I was convinced I was going to die. And so I mean, it upended my whole life, but went back to Austin, Texas, where my parents were to do treatment, did pretty intensive chemotherapy, radiation, the whole roller coaster. But at the end of it, my oncologist told me about this program called First Ascent. He's like, yeah, you can go, do an adventure for a week with other, young people who've experienced this. And, in my mind, I was like, well, I don't need a support group or anything, but I'll go do a week of free adventure. And so I went surfing. I went surfing in North Carolina, the Outer Banks, and turns out I did need it. It was a deeply powerful and impactful experience, and part of it was, I didn't know any other young people that were going through that or that had been through that, and even going into treatment in a big treatment center, I was the youngest person there by 20 years. And so there was, a form of isolation there, and I had great support to a point. But there's just that my peers didn't have that shared experience, and so to be surrounded by that and build a community of that was incredibly powerful. And there's something deeply empowering too about being outdoors. That adventure, that first wave that you catch, that first wall that you summit, that first rapid that you run, after this, body-breaking, mind-melding treatment, that, I can still do this, and to do that in community that has that shared experience, and in nature. I mean, I think there's something so deeply healing about nature for all of us. And so ever since that experience, I said I'm going to be a champion for this cause. I'm going to try to help anyone who wants to have that experience and who's been through that. Try to expand that access. Try to just be a supporter wherever I can. So Silverton was a great fundraiser for that. First Ascent does fundraisers all the time here in Denver and around Colorado. But if you know anyone who's battled MS, a young adult, or cancer, it's a really great organization and well worth checking out. But it is, ultimately, I was lucky to grow up in Crestone, Colorado, with amazing access to the outdoors. We didn't have a TV or anything, so every waking moment was just spent in the outdoors. And that's where I come back to ground, to do my best thinking. It's one of the most important things in my life. Is that access to nature, and that's a big driver of a lot of the work we do. Is everyone's got to have that access. It can't be a privilege. It's got to be a right. And there's still 100 million people in this country that don't have that access, in a shocking amount in Colorado. So that's a big focus of the work we do every day.
Yeah, and that really brings home the idea, that, man, it's fun to go play out in the woods.
Yeah.
And wow, it can be a huge economic engine. And wow, we can move the needle on politics and culture and social and fitness and, health and all these different benefits. But we gotta, sometimes we forget. I mean, we all know, but it's easy for this little part of outdoor recreation to get lost, that it's a respite. It's an important part of our mental health, of our, just outlook, and the way that we interact and move through this world. It's, we all know that. And I think your story is one of the more really beautiful illustrations of the power of the outdoors. Cool. I know we run a wicked tight ship here. It's 1 o'clock. is that time for questions or? All right, sure. I think DK over there has a microphone if someone wants to.
Check.
Yeah, there we go. Excellent. Or no.
Wow.
There we go. That'll make it
everything.
nice and
I
easy.
got one back.
Oh, there's.
That's how good of an interviewer you are.
There is definitely a substantial urban-rural divide in Colorado, and we also see that as the agriculture-conservation divide. What can we do to bridge that? Because it seems central to solving the issues that confront all of us.
Yeah, great question. And everyone could hear that? Yeah. So I think a couple things immediately come to mind. I think recognizing that what unifies us, and again, those things like the outdoors and the need to protect those and pass that on. I think that's, again, a unifier across rural, urban, Republican, Democrat. I also think it's important to really, when you're in a community, especially one that's maybe different from your own, to really genuinely listen. Take the time, listen. My work with the Trust for Public Land before taking this job was creating public funding for conservation and climate and more equitable access to nature around the country, and we did that primarily through ballot measures. So these were campaigns, in many cases, to raise taxes to fund those things. And in my 2.5 years that we raised over $10 billion to do that. But the more remarkable piece is that we won as many campaigns. We ran about 49 campaigns in that time. We won as many in rural, conservative, deeply conservative areas as we did in urban, liberal areas. And that kind of seems surprising when you think about, it's climate, it's conservation. But the key to that success was, and this was the part I loved about this job, was going into those communities and listening and listening and listening. And then we'd do, we'd write a poll and we'd test all those assumptions and everything we were hearing. And then, in the campaign, we'd be using the language of that community. And what we, the purposes that we were funding were always from what we heard people wanted to protect. So for example, in many rural communities, it was protecting the working land, the farms and the ranches. That is the same, we weren't talking about climate resiliency or anything else. Does the same thing, ultimately, but we had to use that language that was true and genuine to those communities. So yeah, just, listen and try to, and engage in a way that's genuine. Because again, I think we have more that brings us together, things like the outdoors, than should be separating us.
I think a good example is the Grand Valley on the western slope. 10 years ago, they said, hey, let's become a hub for recreation. Yep. And they initially came out and said, recreation is going to replace oil and gas, get used to it. Yeah. And that just puts people back in the defensive, right? Like there's a vibrant oil and gas industry in Mason County and Grand Valley, and you don't just tell them that they're going away, get used to it. So then they just shifted the way they talked about it, and they said, hey, this is another leg on the stool. Totally. Aren't you tired of, boom bust cycles? Aren't you tired of up and down? Let's add another little bit of economic diversity, and then so when the oil fields are maybe idled for a bit, we can pull you into the recreation industry, and you can make zip lines and stuff. Yep. And so it was a way that you would talk about it, and the way you would say, hey, oil and gas is really important, and it's not going away. We're not going to replace it. We're going to add something. What do you think? And I think that is, and now, GJ is well on its way to becoming, an outdoor recreation hub. Businesses are moving there. People recognize, energy sector folks are like, this is a rad, business, and we'll all contribute. And it's all about a diversified economy and, extra legs on the stool is what they say out in GJ.
Yeah, well said.
Sure.
Awesome, thank you. So I want to bring in, the outlaw marginal activity of skateboarding.
Yeah.
Colorado has, the second largest amount of skate parks next to California. And it's become mainstream, right? Like you just said, rad. People will say stoked. It's definitely like moved into the mainstream. And you can catch clips all over the place here on the Auraria campus if you're on YouTube. So. My question is about like further pushing skateboarding into the mainstream in this like urban-rural divide that's being discussed. Skate parks on like reservations and tribal lands have had some really great social impacts. What can we do to make public spaces more skatable instead of skate stopped and like continue to embrace this marginal activity for all the rest of y'all?
Have you seen that movie with the skateboarding on the tribal lands down in Four Corners there? God, that is a fantastic movie. Yeah. Short. Right Collegiate Challenge. Go check it out. There's a lady in Salida that owns a skate shop, and Salida has one of the most vibrant skate scenes around.
That's where I learned to skate.
Yeah? Oh, yeah. Super cool. Man, what they do in that park, like their competitions are so cool. But she's created a program, and I think it's just like an online gathering place for skate shop owners around the state to come together, share ideas for growth, share ideas for gatherings, competitions, ways to get more kids engaged. And it's this open platform for sharing among all these different skate shop owners. What's her name, Chuck? Yeah, Stacy at Rampant Alleys. Really cool program. But I think that's another example. Be able to amplify that kind of thing. Like give her a grant or something like that.
Well, totally, and it's a great question. I think for me, anything that gets people and especially kids outside and off their screens is a win. That's great. Kids are now on average spending 7 minutes outside versus over 6 hours on screens, which should scare all of us. And so one thing that I did when, kind of came into this role was to kind of re-examine what we consider outdoor recreation. Historically, this office has been focused on kind of that traditional backcountry outdoor recreation, which is hugely important in the state, and that remains a key focus. But we were a little less focused on maybe things like skateboarding or the rodeo, things that it is recreation outdoors, and in the grant programs, because we did have to define this. Basically, what I said was, if a community comes to us and they say this is a main modality of our way of engaging outdoors, and it's helpful, obviously, if there's an economic driver behind that. But if that's how they interact with the outdoors, far be it for us to say, no, that's not outdoor recreation, we're not going to fund that. And so, we're certainly open to playing more in that space, funding more in that space, because that's the thing. I mean, again, what we care about is people having that access, people being outdoors, and I think as an industry, we need to change that paradigm a little bit that, it's just, someone summiting a 14er or doing some crazy climb or running a crazy rapid. It's also like, gathering with your family out in a park. It's
having a picnic.
Having a picnic. It's, we need to start to shift that, have a little bit of a paradigm shift around, what that outdoor experience is and just broaden it and be more inclusive of things like skateboarding.
Yeah, and you don't need a $250,000 van to go camping.
And that's how you make it more accessible.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
intimidating if you're going to get camping and all of a sudden you think that you need.
And we wonder why people don't feel welcome or it's scary. Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. Well, I think we run a pretty tight ship here, so we got to.
I don't think anyone's ever said that
make
about
run.
you, Jason. I said that with love.
Yeah, there you go. So I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks, everybody. That was fun.
Thanks.
Okay.